Hello and welcome to the Amateur Skeptics Podcast, podcast number 29. With me tonight, Mac.
Hey, how you guys doing tonight?
And of course, Ian.
Greetings and salutations.
And special guest Jen is back again.
Yo.
Excellent. How's everybody doing?
Been better.
Yeah, you're feeling a little puny. How about you guys?
I'm doing all right. I dined this afternoon on corned beef and cabbage with my parents.
It's very German of you.
It's actually supposed to be for our St. Patrick's Day.
Irish, yeah.
We had to do it a little early because my mom's got some medical procedures coming up. So,
Well, the Germans like what is that?
Sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut. Yeah, which is still cabbage, right? Isn't that just pickled cabbage?
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So how Bavarian of you? How about that?
Conan the Bavarian.
Well, because we know that, corned beef is not Irish.
Right.
All right. So, I don't know if people have noticed, but our feed's been messed up for the last couple of weeks here as I have been rebuilding the website because I destroyed it.
We can rebuild it faster,
Stronger,
better.
So I redid the template, the theme, and I think it looks pretty good, better than what we had for sure. So I've redone that. I've been re-uploading the podcasts and putting the site back together. I've had a few other technical issues. There's some issues with some of the modules I had installed that I had to resolve. Got all that up and going. So there's now two feeds. There's a feed that has everything in it, which I'm calling the archive feed, and then another feed that just has the last 10 episodes, which is what I'm putting on iTunes and probably what the feed that most people have. So if for some reason people wanted the back episodes, the other feed is available, and we'll get that filled out here eventually. But for right now, the feed that we're going to keep current is the last 10.
Okay.
So there we go. And
The archived ones are being re-released with artwork added to them.
right, that's the hold up on those, is that we're adding artwork as Mac creates it.
Yep. And I've got most of them done. I've just got maybe 7 left to go.
Okay. Yeah. So there's only a couple, so that we'll get all that back up, and everything will be good again. And then, of course, I know that the levels were bad on last week's recording. We had some low audio, and I tried my best to flush it out, and I knew that it went up and down, and I tried to normalize it and all of this, and it wasn't great. So we'll try not to let that happen again. We will try to do better about our recording.
And our volume.
And our volume.
So we're going to try to keep our levels consistent throughout the podcast.
Yes, and thank you for your support. All right, moving on. So I got to go to Skepticamp, and you didn't. Nanny.
Yes, neener indeed.
That's right. So my plans got canceled, and I got to go to Skepticamp. What's that, Ian?
Well, I heard you participated in the Skeptics trip tease and won for the most freaky-looking buttwort.
Yeah, but that was a pasty, but they let it slide.
Okay.
Thanks for bringing it up. Still hurts. So I got to go to Skepticamp, and I participated in the Science in the Media panel, and I was on that panel, and I also did my Mechanics of Astrology presentation that I'm working on.
To do again at Skeptic.
Right, to do again at Skepticamp. My intention was to do it in the upcoming Skepticamp, but when I told them I was coming, they said, and asked them, do you have enough speakers? They said, well, we have room on the media panel. I think that they had already wanted me on there. And they said, yeah, and we actually have a slot open. So I took that slot and went up there with one day to prepare.
And all of our listeners, we do have the media panel was posted last week on our site, so you can actually hear his panel on that.
Yeah, and once again, the audio's not fantastic on that, but I thought I cleaned it up pretty well compared to what the actual recording sounded like. It was a significant reduction in noise. Yeah, so it was fun. The one thing about this Skepticamp, the way that they did it, the last Skepticamp is generally you either have one room, maybe two. This Skepticamp had like 5 or 6 rooms, which was kind of unusual. And they gave you 20 minutes of presentation time and 10 minutes to get to your next talk, which was plenty. And that way the speakers had enough time to set up and move on. The problem with it was you couldn't see most of the talks because while you're talking, there's, 4 talks going on, simultaneously. So that was a little frustrating because I didn't get to as many things as I would have liked.
Well, that's the thing. Most real conventions, that's how it goes. You have so much going on at once. Skeptics Camp that we went to last year, being as small as it was kind of nice. But if they're going to grow, and it sounds like Fort Collins has a real good skeptic community up there. So, as the stuff gets bigger, it's going to be harder and harder to, keep it small. So I'm not overly surprised that happened.
Yeah. So the first talk that I went to was, the description was kind of weird, but it said in the description, "Geeks, come here." So I did as I was told, and I went along to his presentation because it said, "Geeks, come here." So I went.
Good geek. You've been trained well.
Exactly. So, okay, that's where I go. And what it ended up being was he was talking about programming, and he was talking about the issues with programming when you're doing pattern recognition and separating out, different types of patterns. And the what he presented was he showed a car and a tank. And he went through what the problem is for a computer to look at both of those and distinguish them, and what has to happen for a computer to recognize that those are 2 different patterns. And where this became important was when you're looking at IBM's new supercomputer, Watson, and what Watson had to do in order to parse the Jeopardy questions to come up with an answer. So it was pretty interesting to go through the steps of what we need to be done. And of course, in 20 minutes, he didn't dive very deep into that. He just gave us an idea of how the problem is solved and how you get closer and closer to finding the pattern that you're looking for with the information given.
That's interesting because when we see a car versus a tank as humans, we automatically make certain connections and get into a certain mindset toward each one of those because of our recognition of the pattern.
Well, yeah, humans
we've built that pattern over years.
Yeah,
that's true.
Well, at Mile High Con, before the Critter Crunch the last few years, they've had people come out. I wasn't going to remember the name of the robot they use, but they have a robot that they are programming like that, and they actually go through a little 20-minute thing showing how they program him to determine, what things are and stuff like that. And they actually go through and they show them, giving him instructions and explain, this is a chair. He will scan the chair and be able to recognize chairs, anything that fits that pattern of a chair. And it's actually, an interesting little thing they do. But yeah, the last few years at Mile High Con, right before the Critter Crunch, they've been doing that. And you can, like I said, you see the process, see them explaining to him, what this is and what to do about it and how to deal with it. And they even go to the fact that if you turn the chair, it's not going to recognize it until you explain to it that that's a chair from a different angle.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
So IBM has done this pretty successfully for the purpose of playing Jeopardy. They have shown that humanity is nothing compared to the computer, and eventually our robot overloads are coming.
Yep.
Huzzah.
Huzzah. No, actually, there's a huge leap between Watson and Skynet. Yeah. But everybody is kind of, they see that how well it did, and they get kind of scared. But what that technology is actually going to be very good for is, say, a doctor can take a list of symptoms and put it into a computer and get back, a list of diagnoses that are compatible with the symptoms that they put in. But it's still going to take a human to look at those and recognize which ones might apply and which ones might not.
That's tailor-made for an episode of House.
Absolutely, isn't it?
Well, it's funny because
it is.
The other Hepburn, Catherine, she was in a movie where she was a research librarian, and they bring in this supercomputer, and her crew are all worried that the computer's going to take their place, and finally it comes out in the end, no, it's supposed to help you. It's the same thing. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they were making movies about it.
Right, but only now has IBM actually produced it.
But, so this computer can play Jeopardy?
Oh, well, yes. Humanity was absent the day that they played
Alex,
Jeopardy.
I can't do that.
No, it was not an issue. Ken Jennings actually, Jen, you read that article, right, that Ken Jennings wrote about Watson?
I read the beginning of it, and he talked about how he was kind of like, yay, I'm standing up for humanity. But then when he actually went to film the episode, he was obviously in hostile territory because IBM, all their crew was there cheering on their little robot guy.
Well, and this was in conjunction with Jeopardy. I mean, ultimately, I mean, for this to work, though, what they had to program was pretty amazing. But it's very problem specific.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and in the long run, what they're really trying to do is bring high talent back to IBM, right?
Yeah, that's part of what they want to do because, Microsoft and Apple are, they're good at acquiring talent because, they're exciting companies.
Names.
Yeah, sexy. And IBM, it doesn't seem so sexy, but clearly what they're doing is...
fascinating to us geeks.
Fascinating to us geeks, which is who they need to attract. So
exactly.
They have won. Amen. All right. So then I proceeded to the media panel, which was pretty interesting. I mean, we talked about the issue of science in the media, and were there any good sources? And ultimately, it was funny when that's asked. And have you guys listened to that?
Nope.
Mac, you haven't listened to my...
I haven't listened to it yet.
Anyway, so...
I downloaded it today, though.
It was a resounding no from the panel. That, there's no good sources. No good mainstream sources. I mean, there's good, science.com and places like that. But, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, none of them really present science well.
No.
And so we had a discussion as to why that is. And it's on there. It's interesting. My big thing is that the perception of science is that it's difficult. And this is a problem because this starts in school. And Matthew Baxter makes that point that we're taught in school that science is tough. You have to take a class. And they forget that when you're out playing in mud and discovering, the consistency of it, that you're doing science. People do science all the time. So we have a huge problem, particularly in this country, with scientific literacy because I think it's because the perception... Literacy, sorry, thank you. Literacy, which I'm not, clearly. But we have a huge problem in that we teach people that science is difficult, when really the foundations should be fairly simple. People should be able to understand
cause and effect,
the scientific method. For the most part, the basics of the scientific method aren't that tough. Proper testing.
Right.
Right?
I started reading that Carl Sagan book that you picked up for me, The Demon Haunted World.
Excellent book.
And one of the things that he makes in the point in there is that when you're in high school or when you're in grade school and you're doing science, it's hard to get a teacher that really shows you the joy of science. I remember when I was doing chemistry in high school, we had a fun teacher, and he mixed up a unstable compound and mined the room with it. He's putting these spots all over the room of this liquid, and we don't know what he's doing until the liquid dries, and he puts some girl's notes she's been taking on top of it, drops a pencil on it, and her notes turn into a brilliant flower. And suddenly we started to wonder how we were getting out of the room. He put it on the bottom of one girl's shoe. Great teacher.
Right. So he found a way to make science fun, and because of that experience, you remember that very specifically.
I remember that real well, whereas I don't remember a darn thing from physics class.
There you go. Right.
I remember the anthropology teacher in college who took us out throwing ladles, who took us on field trips, who had people come in to show us how to chip out stone tools. I remember that real well.
Yeah. So that was a good discussion. What really comes out of it is that we need more. Well, we need more podcasts talking about science. But my problem is that this particular media is not for everybody. And how do we get it to more people if we're going to make it a more dominant media? I don't think most people listen to podcasts. I don't know what the demographics look like, but I would suspect that it's 20% of computer users, maybe less.
Yeah, probably less.
Yeah.
And those who listen to podcasts are, essentially shut-in maniacs, endlessly, ceaselessly sharpening their scythe, waiting for the apocalypse.
Except
or
for
is
our
that
listeners.
just me?
Yeah, that's just you.
Okay.
Yeah, go outside once in a while. There's this big ball of light in the sky. We call it the sun.
I've wondered about that. I fear it.
I bet you do. White.
I fear it. Although I do go out during the night to, get the Eloy to eat. So, anyway.
Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I enjoyed being part of that panel. And then I met Mark Edwards, who talked about guerrilla skepticism. And, he's certainly not promoting that everybody go out and do what he's doing, but he's certainly been into a lot of really aggressive types of...
breaking up psychics meetings.
Yeah, I mean, what he did to Sylvia Brown, that story is absolutely fantastic.
I'm already kind of skeptical about gorillas anyway.
So anyway,
moving on.
Yeah, moving on. Mark Edwards, neat guy. He's a magician. He's a buddy of Penn and Teller's, and he knows Randy and all them. So he's he's involved in another project that I'm working on. He's part of IIG West, which is the Independent Investigations Group. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the next panel I went to, the way that they did is they tried to make it so the panel discussions, there was nothing else going on in the rooms, so they tried to fill up the big room for the panel discussions. The next one was religion and skepticism. And the panel was supposed to be a diverse panel, atheists, agnostic, and religions. But, you might not think that there is a lot of Christians and religious people at these kinds of events. But I know that there was at least 4 of them that day because they were on the panel and one atheist.
Okay.
Yeah, and it kind of was unfortunate. It kind of devolved into a us against you, type of evidentiary look at things instead of a discussion of, how do we get past our differences here so that we can move on to maybe things that are more important.
What really matters.
Right.
That's really a pity that it devolved like that.
Yeah, and one of the things though that's bothersome though is that a lot of skeptics they feel that if you follow skepticism to its ultimate end, asking the question, looking for evidence, in the end you have to ask questions about everything, and in the end you end up, well, there's no evidence, so you end up atheist. And I think that that's fine. But I also think that it's okay for people to have their sacred cows. Okay, they might have this one thing that they don't want to question. But then again, I hear the argument that if you're not willing to question that, what's the next thing that you're not going to be willing to question? Where else can't you go? So it's an interesting discussion. And I think better off a discussion of sacred cows, things that we have personally that maybe we don't want to question, and why that is. So... but unfortunately, the thing is, when you start asking skeptics who are Christians or religious in some way what their reasons are as bad, if not worse, than any Christian apologist. And instead of just saying, this is my thing, and I'm okay with it, they also feel that they have to somehow give a reason for it. And when they do that, that gives other skeptics an in to start whittling away at it. And the worst argument that was made up there, that I let it go. I really wanted to stand up and and address it, but I didn't, was one of the gentlemen, and he says, I think that this is the way it is because there's no other answer for it. I don't know how else people came up with this. And so people make
argument from exclusion?
Argument from ignorance, personal incredulity. I can't see any other way that this could have happened.
Personal
so
incredulity,
somebody
right.
must have told us. So it was the argument from personal incredulity, and it really infuriated me to hear that coming from a skeptic. Such an invalid, fallacious argument I found irritating. But I also didn't feel that it was worth challenging at that time. I didn't feel like that was the proper place for it. I really felt like this was supposed to be, I don't know. Maybe I was wrong.
Well,
maybe I should have.
It's a camp for people to learn how to be better skeptics.
Right. But in all honesty, Bryan Walsh addressed it in a much better fashion and tried to give other explanations, as did other people, saying, well, look at how creative we are. We could have come up with this stuff. And what the guy says is, I reject your argument because people aren't creative enough to come up with it. It's like, oh my God. So they moved him along. Let's move along. Let's go.
Did God create the TV?
It's a wonderful question. I don't know who else could have. So it must be God. God also created podcasting because who else could have come up with this media?
Exactly.
Right?
I thought God hates podcasts.
Well,
clearly the devil came up with podcasting.
Okay, yeah, okay. Anyway, so I guess that, that's, but none of the arguments were any better. They were all fallacious. They were all fallacies. Every single one of them. I just want these people to say, listen, I believe in God, and I want to believe in God, and let's move on to something else. Because
Right.
I don't, because there's no other way for me to deal, because every time they give a reason, you can needle at it, right? You can start to ask questions and poke at it. And I sometimes wonder if it's any good, because I want to deal with the pieces of religion that are damaging, that are harmful. I want to address things like, Catholics and being against birth control and their immoralities there. I want to address things like exorcism. I want to address other things that are hurting people, that are preventing us from moving forward. I'm not so much concerned. Faith healing, that's of course a bugger of mine. I'm not so much concerned with the people that are going to church because they like the community, because I understand that, and I think that is reasonable for them to, want to have that kind of a community gathering. And
heck, beyond reasonable. It's great.
Right, exactly.
If people want to go to church because they want to go to church, that's great.
Well, and we're seeing many more people where we're seeing atheist Christians, atheist Catholics, that I say, I can't believe in God anymore, but I still need this group. I still need these people.
Right.
And that's okay. And so I sometimes feel like if we're too hard on those people who I don't think are doing harm and are getting something that they need out of this community, that we're really shooting ourselves in the foot. Let's deal with the pieces of it that are bad, that are doing harm, and address those. And let's keep it inside the church and out of politics. Let's have our secular society, and you do your religion at home. And so I really would like to see us do that more. Religion, it's just such a sinkhole. It just seems to me like one where you deal with the pieces of it that are harmful and you leave the rest of it alone. And maybe that's just because I'm being too...
well, religion's like an unhealed wound for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You poke at it and you get a really bad reaction. So...
Yeah. So anyway, the next thing that I did was I did my presentation, which was the Mechanics of Astrology. And I made a critical mistake here, assuming that everybody had a kind of a basic understanding of astrology. And I was wrong, because some of the people that came to my talk didn't know anything about astrology. So I thought, well, I'm doing the Mechanics of Astrology, but they also understood that what I was trying to present was too vast to do in 20 minutes. So I got a good response for it. I just had to make some changes for the next Skepticamp. So, and then I'm sure I did something else. Reed was going through, his talk was on, basically the reasons that people say I don't know. And he went through the good reasons that people say I don't know and the bad reasons that people say I don't know. And so sometimes where maybe people just don't want to address something, they'll just say I don't, and try and weasel out of it. Whereas other times where skeptics will say, when they really can't explain something and they need to investigate further maybe, or it's not explained, we'll just say, I don't know right now, and move on. So he went through the different reasons that people might say no, whether and from the spectrum of good all the way to where it's harmful. And so that was fun to go through his presentation. I think we didn't have enough time to get through it all. I think it got cut off. So anyway, it was a good day. Had a lot of fun.
No, the rest of us.
Yeah. See, so I'm just talking away, talk. Okay, so
hey, you were having a good time.
I was. I had a very good time. Now, the IIG is the Independent Investigations Group, and you guys came with me to that meeting. What'd you think?
Potential. I'm waiting to see what you guys come up with to get it started, but the idea is definitely worth being part of.
I enjoyed the meeting. I liked the people who did the presentation. It was intriguing. The technical problems were kind of hurtful, but I think they did manage to get their point across, and they made a good presentation despite having problems with that laptop. So
5 of us have agreed to be on the initial committee to basically put together the first meeting to put together the steering committee. So we're putting together a meeting for the people who will put together the meeting.
You should explain a little more about what IIG is.
Yeah, IIG is the Independent Investigations Group, and what they are doing is they do a couple of things. One, they do investigations where maybe somebody can't explain something going on in their house that might be scaring them. There was a lady who every morning would come into her kitchen and find a puddle of green stuff, and her friends and family told her that it was aliens or ghosts or spirits and that she needed to get out of that house. So she called the IIG. They came in, did an investigation, and what they found out was they had a refrigerator, not just a refrigerator repairman, but like appliance repairman. And what they determined was happening was at night, for some reason, the compressor would start to leak, and it would leak antifreeze, and there was a depression in the floor, so it would pool in the center of the floor. And by morning, the trail had dried up.
So you just had a little bit in the bottom of the depression.
Right. So you just stayed in the depression. And
nothing supernatural or alien to it.
No, exactly. So very, very logical explanation. So they'll do those types of investigations. The other thing that they'll do is they do have a $50,000 challenge for anybody who can present themselves as having supernatural powers. So they can, they have tested people for different things. They had a woman who claimed that she could tell if somebody had had a kidney removed. So they did a preliminary test with her, and she did not pass that preliminary test. So what they did is they got with her, decided which of her many powers they were going to test, decided on a protocol, and decided on what the outcome of the protocol had to be. And for her to be successful, she had to guess 100% of the time. She had to be 100% right. So because she had to be...
Because that was her claim.
Because that was her claim.
She could do it 100% of the time.
Right.
That was her agreement, that she could do it 100% of the time.
Right. It wouldn't...
And that if she were not able to do it 100% of the time, that it would not be a success. That was her agreement.
Right.
Right.
And she was able to do one, and she failed the other two. So they did 3 tests. She ultimately failed that test.
And basically they said someone in the studio audience did just as well as her, and someone online who was doing the test did just as well as her.
Right. So
the probability of someone randomly getting those results.
Right, and they only did 3 tests, and it was a preliminary. Had she passed, she wouldn't have gotten the $50,000. They would have gone on and done a more scientifically rigorous test to try and flesh out chance and make sure it was statistically accurate.
No one has passed the preliminaries.
No, nobody's, not for Randy's $100 million challenge or for the $50,000 challenge. Nobody's ever been able to, come up and say, this is what I can do, this is how often I can do it, and which has to be better than chance.
Right, and no one's ever been able to beat chance.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the guys they were talking about that they investigated, actually the audience scored higher by pure chance than he did with his powers.
Of course, he showed up drunk, from what they said.
With that one, yeah. They kind of...
Yeah, he was, I think they said that he was so drunk they were surprised he was actually upright.
Right.
So...
Yeah, so I think that they learned something from that, though. That they will build that into the protocol that, you must show up sober probably next time. So they've done some of these challenges. Let's see.
I watched a movie called Super High Me, where this comedian who's famed for his coming up on stage and doing jokes about pot. He basically set up so that he would do 30 days completely straight, and then do 30 days high all the time. And one of the tests that he did while he was straight and while he was high was he did a psychic test. And he completely muffed the test while he was straight. But when he was high, he scored a interestingly high average on the test. So, it's reasonable to say that in a drunk state, your mind might be relaxed and more susceptible to psychic impressions.
Yeah. Well, the stuff like the roadside tests they do for drunk drivers, you could be completely drunk and be able to pass them, yet be sober and not. So, there's certain things about, how the mind works drunk and not and sober that can be a bit off anyways.
Yeah. So.
Yep.
All right. You guys ready to move on and talk about anti-vaccination?
Get to the real podcast?
Yeah, let's get to the real podcast. I mean,
And... straight from Bryan Productions, it's the anti-vaccination show.
Yay!
Well, we got one thing to do before that, apparently.
Let's skip it. Let's skip it.
Okay.
Because this next part is I'm going to drone on about this too. So.
Okay.
All right. So one of the things that we talked about on that panel was Bill Gates coming out and saying that he said mothers who didn't vaccinate their children and died because they didn't get the vaccinations that they need, killed their children, that they're killing children.
That's not exactly how he said it.
That's not exactly, yeah. Well, that's how it's being taken, especially from the anti-vax community. And really, it's more manslaughter. They didn't mean to kill their kids. To be completely flippant about it, right? So, I was gonna play that portion of it, but basically what he said was that, he talked about the importance of vaccinations, and that if you don't get your kids vaccinated and they get one of these diseases and die, that they died from a preventable disease.
Yep.
And this is the real problem with with these anti-vaccination movements. And none of the people in these movements want to be seen as anti-vax. They go to great lengths to show themselves as just being about vaccine safety until you actually start to read their sites. And in Australia, Meryl Dorey's site, the Australian Vaccination Network, they finally told her, you need to put on your site that you're anti-vaccination. Because everything on her site is about the dangers of vaccination. No fair and balanced. It's just an anti-vax site. And
right.
So when I heard about what Bill Gates had said, and I went and listened to it, I was more interested in what these other networks were saying. Who's talking about the vaccinations? So I went to three. Generation Rescue didn't even address it that I saw on their site. I didn't see anything. This one is from Autism Key, and they go through and they address it, and they weren't.
They didn't really like the use of the term anti-vaccine
right.
to characterize themselves.
Right.
But, they're saying here, most responsible anti-vaccine people are not running around discouraging parents from vaccinating their children. Well, that seems to be kind of disingenuous.
I think it is too, because I think that's exactly what they're doing.
Because that what discouraging parents from vaccinating their children is exactly what Jenny McCarthy's all about. I know this is not her, but are they disavowing her behavior? Are they breaking with her in this article?
They're not. When you go through this article and you listen to what they're saying, ultimately, in the end, they don't like the language that he used, and they said, but don't expect any apologies from Bill Gates. And then they make claim that that he's suspected of having Asperger's syndrome.
Okay, so if he's suspected of having an autism spectrum disorder, then he should be a very good spokesman to say that vaccines are not a factor in this.
Well, but ultimately he's not. Whether he has autism spectrum disorder or not is really irrelevant to whether or not vaccines cause autism. And
yes, it is.
He is a very smart man, and I have to believe that he's read most of the research and he understands most of the research. What he's read.
What I'm making a point of here, though, is they're saying that because he's suspected to have Asperger's syndrome, which is an autism spectrum disorder, he can't be objective about this.
Well, that's exactly what they're saying.
That would seem to throw him down on the side of the anti-vaccinators instead of...
Right. Well, that's the thing. By that logic, Jenny McCarthy can't be seen as being subjective about it because he's siding the other way because her son has autism.
Right.
So anyone who's associated with autism in any way, shape, or form can't be subjective. And
objective.
Weak argument.
Yeah, objective.
Yeah. Well, and they seem to imply here also that he's getting money from the vaccine movement when in fact he's donating to get vaccines.
No, they say he's got $10 million in the vaccine movement. Well, yeah, he does because he has a mission to eradicate polio from the world. Can you believe this guy?
Invested.
Can you believe this guy? He wants to eradicate something? Well, what is he up on his high horse about?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's not invested. It's donated into it. He's not planning on making any money back from it.
Well, he has a vested interest in helping out
the whole world.
Yeah, he does. Bill Gates wants to do something with his life. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation does great work. I mean, nobody would dare deny that. I mean, they give plenty of money, for malaria research. And they want to eliminate polio and which they can do. One of the reasons he's chosen polio is because it's obtainable. It was almost done, but the anti-vaccine movement ruined that. I really do think that they have a lot of responsibility for the fact that polio is still around, because it's these scare tactics that they've used about vaccines that...
Well, not only is polio still around, but smallpox is making a comeback in some parts of the world.
I haven't heard smallpox. I have heard that polio is making huge comebacks. I haven't heard smallpox.
Okay, and I heard it, but I don't know how trustworthy my sources are.
I hope you're wrong.
But like we've had whooping cough make a big comeback recently.
Yes, pertussis has come back.
Yeah, we've had a few of these that we thought we could probably get rid of, that due to the anti-vaccination crowd have been making a comeback here in the United States as well as worldwide.
I'm pretty sure it was Africa. In places of Africa, they have it's an oral vaccine. You go get a couple drops, and men especially were going and getting their first vaccination, but you've got to get it twice. But they weren't going back for their second round because they were being told that what they were really trying to do was make men impotent, and that if they got these vaccines, that they would become impotent. And so, well, I mean, can you imagine somebody tells you this, and you might not have the resources to go and look to see if that's true or not? What are you gonna do? I'm not getting that vaccine. So it's that wasn't the vaccination network. That was other misconceptions. But still, it was ignorance of the science.
Yeah. So
and then the next one. So this one was pretty mild as far as a rebuttal to Bill Gates. The next one is the one I was really looking for.
Oh yeah.
And this one,
because they want people to basically denial of service attack Microsoft.
Right.
Fill up the email boxes with emails asking for a clarification and an apology.
Right. And so this is from Age of Autism. And so I expected Age of Autism, and I also had expected Generation Rescue to come out and just be like over the top with their rebuttal. And I was hoping for a little bit more, but Age of Autism really got very close, and they go through and they attack him. And one of the things that it's the first part of this that really got me was that they said that Bill Gates was attacking people who were concerned about vaccine safety. Nobody is talking about vaccine safety. Everybody is concerned with vaccine safety. Even Bill Gates. Everybody wants these vaccines to be perfectly safe, and we want them to be researched. Nobody is saying stop testing vaccines for safety. What we are saying is we've looked for a link between autism and vaccines, and we can't find it. It isn't there. We need to move on, and we need to continue doing safety trials. But maybe we can put more money into looking at safety as opposed to looking for a connection between autism and vaccines. That's the piece that needs to be eliminated. And maybe it doesn't need to be eliminated. I mean, maybe there is still something there that needs to be looked at. But nobody's saying stop looking. But we are saying, look, these things have been tested. They've been found safe. Yes, there are some issues with them. They're not perfect. And we know that a very, very small percentage of people are going to be harmed by vaccine. That's why we have a vaccine court to deal with those cases. And they deal with those on a case-by-case basis. So we are concerned about vaccine safety, but we're not concerned that vaccines are causing autism anymore. It's done. It's over.
It almost seems as if they...
Go ahead.
It almost seems as if they don't have anything else to talk about, so they have to keep on pounding on this vaccine autism link that doesn't exist, that there's no proof of.
Well, they're desperate for a reason. And on one side of me, I understand that they'd like to know why this happened to their child.
Yeah.
But if they can't get past the fact that we've done the safety trials and these vaccines aren't causing autism, if they can't get past that, then they can't continue looking elsewhere. You get blinded. And so these people have got to take the blinders off and continue looking for other causes.
Now, one of the other arguments I've seen, I think one of these articles had it, that I've always found interesting, is they talk about the weakened immune systems of the babies and the infants that are getting them. And saying, oh, well, if you give vaccines to them, that's going to mess up their immune system. But what they're ignoring is the fact that... Well, they're also ignoring the fact that the infants at that age are the ones who are more likely going to die if they catch the diseases these vaccinations prevent.
If you eat a handful of dirt you will work your immune system much harder than getting every vaccine in the schedule all at once.
Right.
That your body is encountering many, many more things it has to fight off every day than what we're putting into it with a few vaccines. And
like I said, the infants are at the higher death rate if they catch things. So it's like, get them young, get them when you can to make sure that your kid's not going to die. Because if your 2-year-old gets one of these things, your 2-year-old's more likely going to die than if the kid got it when they're 5, and they're definitely more likely going to die than if they got vaccinated against it.
Right, and you know what? Kids have a fairly robust immune system, and it's building at that time. So let's help it build. Let's give it the tools that it needs to keep it healthy. Our immune systems can handle a very large, amount of stuff being thrown at it all at once. So work it. That's the only way to boost the immune system, is to work it with these kinds of things for it to be looking at and to create antibodies for. So from there though, I made it to of course I looked after I read this on Age of Autism. I went to Generation Rescue because I thought they have got to have a rebuttal to this, right? But I didn't find a rebuttal to it. But what I did find that was interesting, as I started reading their site, I found a link to Andrew Wakefield's original paper in the Lancet, and I thought, well, now this is interesting. So, and I wasn't sure that it was on their site, so I wasn't sure. Was it the original one? I didn't know. And then I found it on Bryan Deer's site, so it is the original paper. And the reason that I read it, I mean, one, I should read it anyway, right? But one of the claims that they said is Andrew Wakefield says in the paper that they did not find a link between autism and his gut disease. Is it leaky gut or whatever? I mean, he talks about gut issues. And so I read the paper, and sure enough, yes, he does say that in the paper that they didn't find a link. But reading the paper was pretty interesting. It was a collection of 12 children. Now, as I was going through this, I was thinking, well, there's quite a few of these kids that you can eliminate for one reason or another. One, you've got 11 boys and 1 girl. Well, now you don't have a significant a significant portion of girls here to really impact the study. So,
well, there is autism is more common among boys than girls.
Okay.
So if they're studying autism itself, you're going to probably have a larger amount of boys compared to girls just because of that factor.
Okay. So
but 12 is not a high level of a population sample anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Particularly to make an inference like that.
It's not statistically significant anyway. And one of the kids didn't get the vaccine. One of them had gotten measles.
Measles.
Right, and then another one was already being watched because they suspected that he might have some sort of a disorder. So he was being watched from a young age anyway. So, I mean, so it seems like, he doesn't belong in the study. But one thing I noticed is that it's a small study, and it seems very self-selecting. Every kid that was in here, the mothers had made a connection. Now, the parents had made a connection between them getting the MMR vaccine and seeing these symptoms, according to Wakefield's paper. We know now that from Bryan Deer's research that probably isn't the case. But just from his paper, you see that the children in the study were mothers that had identified the symptoms after getting the MMR vaccine. So every child that he selected for the study had been identified for the parent as having this connection already. So, it's like, well, okay. I mean, so it's not a random sample by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
Bryan, you had asked me about the spelling in Wakefield's paper.
Yeah.
The spelling is British.
Oh, it is. Okay, so that's why.
There's a consistent change in spelling in the word behavior.
Mm-hmm.
There is a consistent spelling changes in some other words. That's actually the British spelling of the words.
Great. That's one of the reasons I asked you to look at that.
Damn those Brits! Don't they know how to use the English language?
Well, they all talk funny with accent anyway.
Aluminium, morons. I just pissed somebody off. They're wrong on that one, by the way. It is aluminum, no matter what they say. Okay, so but he continually makes reference to these. Every one of these kids had some sort of bowel distress. They gave him a colonoscopy, and so every one of them had disease in the colon and stuff like that. And you go through it, and he's continually putting the link together and suggesting it throughout the paper constantly. They had these symptoms and this. But one of the interesting things I found about the paper was that he made the claim that if you got the toxins and stuff out of the colon and gut, that the symptoms got better. So now I know where all of these crazy diets that autistic mothers are putting their parents on came from. It's
putting their parents.
Putting their parents on that they put their kids on. Sorry about that. These diets because he makes reference to gluten and stuff like that in the paper, and so that's why you see all these gluten-free diets and detoxing diets and stuff like that. And this is the stuff that Jenny McCarthy had used that she says cured her son's autism. So that was pretty interesting. So now I know where that came from. So,
my understanding is also that her son was also put through some intensive behavior therapy as well.
I think that they've done a lot of things, and this is one of those things where you throw the kitchen sink at it, and if you see any recovery, you attribute it to something.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It is what it kind of sounds like to me.
So she's going with what her mommy sense says.
Exactly, her mommy sense. She doesn't need science. Her science is at home, and she learned from Dr. Google. There's a dangerous combination right there. So as I was going through the paper, it occurred to me, do all autistic children have diarrhea and abdominal pain? In fact, I don't have this link in here yet, in the show notes. Sorry about that, guys. I'll get it in there, when we put it up. So I did a check for that, because I thought, is this consistent across the board? Because if you're going to connect it with autism, I almost think that it would have to be. It isn't the case. There is a significant amount of, diarrhea and abdominal pain in autistic children, but it's not all of them. But it's a statistically high number. But not all autistics have this problem. And I have a study that it was a panel of like 27 doctors who went through this and to put it together. So to make the claim that it's a gut disease that's causing autism seems extraordinary to me. Anyway, because not all autistics have this symptom. So it would seem to me that you would have to look at autistics who didn't have these symptoms to see if they still had this same colon diseases and maybe just didn't have the symptoms to make that connection, which Andrew Wakefield did not do. He didn't evaluate.
One of the questions I have about Wakefield's study, though, is what about the kid who didn't have the vaccine but had the measles? Is that just not statistically significant to him?
Well, yeah. So does measles cause autism? It would seem like either way, if you're looking at that whether the kid got measles or whether he got the vaccination, that they might get autism.
Well, and there have been a lot of kids who've gotten measles and don't show autistic symptoms.
Exactly. So
measles doesn't cause autism.
Right. And we know now that he had a financial reason for doing a lot of this. So I mean, there's a lot more to go through here, but ultimately Andrew Wakefield's paper, if you read it, isn't very strong at all. I mean, it was not impressive.
It's pretty much pointing at the conclusion and not really looking at the evidence. It's trying to make the evidence fit the conclusion.
Exactly, make the evidence fit the conclusion, and then deny the conclusion in the paper, saying, "Hey, well, listen, we didn't find this," which should be the end of the story, right? Well, no, because I also found the press release from the Royal Free Hospital School of Medicine, and in here, Andrew Wakefield clearly says that there is a connection between autism and gut disease in the press release. So he says it everywhere but in the actual study. So it gets overlooked in the study that he didn't make the connection because he says it everywhere else that he made this connection. So everybody says, hey, Andrew Wakefield did this study and found a connection between gut disease and autism, which he did not do according to his own words until you get to the press release.
Right.
So it was interesting for me.
Maybe he's just trying to blame it all on John Walker Smith.
It was interesting for me to start to make some of these connections of where all of this is coming from and how convoluted it is and how difficult it is to connect all the dots. And I didn't go through everything the not Age of Autism, but on Generation Rescue, because they one of the things I was interested in is that there's a paper on there that claims that people who get the hepatitis B vaccine have a higher incidence of autism. So, and they have the the abstract from that study on their site, and so that'll be interesting to look through and to start to go through and pick apart what they're what they're talking about. But man, you have to go back and forth. You got to go find a credible reference that talks about this stuff, and then go back to Generation Rescue. And Generation Rescue was founded by a father whose child was injured by vaccines and got money from the vaccine court. But her case is being misinterpreted and abused in a way that that makes it look like the government is claiming that the vaccine did cause autism. But they never make that claim. When you look at what the findings were, you actually find that she had a pre-existing neurological condition that was aggravated by the vaccines. And so she was injured by the vaccine. She's one of the statistically small number of people who did have a reaction. And the court paid her for that. But then they go and they start this site and they abuse that information for Generation Rescue.
And Generation Rescue is the one that Jenny McCarthy is associated with.
That's Jenny
right?
McCarthy, yes. So
now, when you go through the CDC's protocols for vetting vaccines and their safety with respect to how they first warn people about vaccines and how they handle possible vaccine injuries afterwards, it's extremely thorough.
Yes, it is. Oh, yeah. I mean,
and thank you for including that link in there.
Yeah.
Because I read through that, and even the process of testing a vaccine seems to be exhaustive to me.
Well, it is exhaustive. So you're talking about vaccine safety, and I wanted to include that article on here as a reference point, but I didn't want to go through it piece by piece. But it does take over 10 years to actually put a vaccine out in wide release after it's being tested. Right, and then they talk about the studies that they continue to do on it, looking for possible problems afterwards, because they admit that in their samples for these 10 years that they don't catch everything, and so when they put it out into the population, they continue to look for problems because there might be something that has to be changed when they put it into the larger population that we might see a significant problem in the larger population. It's amazing the rigor that they go through for this because of the issues that vaccines have had in the past. They have done a lot of harm, and so they're watched incredibly closely now.
What was that child's pre-existing neurological condition? Do you have that information
I
available?
don't have that information. That was one of the things I wanted to include. If you go over to science-based medicine...
It was mitochondrial.
A mitochondrial DNA issue?
Yeah.
Okay. If you can look that up over at Science-Based Medicine blog, if you go over there, you'll be able to find quite a bit on that particular issue. So I also have a link to some more to Brian Deere's response to Wakefield, because they're slandering Brian Deere as if he's looking for the money. They want to know who's paying Brian Deere. Well, he's an independent journalist. He gets paid when he puts an article together. But they want to claim they'd really like to show a connection between him and Big Pharma.
His response was actually pretty classy.
It was, yeah. So we've got that. That is in our show notes too, and people can take a look at that. And can we move on now? Can we talk about breast milk, please?
We can talk about
breast milk. Talk about movies.
Yeah.
I do want to make one point though. You said mitochondrial. I'm pretty sure that word is pronounced midichlorian.
Moving on.
Moving on to breasts.
All right, let's move on to breasts.
One subject we definitely all really enjoy talking about. So, in the UK recently, a restaurant, I guess, started serving ice cream made from breast milk. Well,
now specify, Ian. It's all breast milk.
Yes.
But this was made with human
breast milk.
Yes. Okay. Made with human breast milk.
Yeah,
And they were actually serving this ice cream. It was called marketed as Baby Gaga.
Yes.
And apparently, a couple complaints showed up, and so the health officials had to go in and stop the selling of it until they did some testing. And I've always found it interesting that we have these issues about breast milk, human breast milk, because we have the cow, goat, all these other milks that we drink. We have honey, which is to me the same kind of thing. It is a product made by animals naturally. We have eggs, which could even be viewed as almost a more disturbing thing. You know, we have all this
it's
food
the
stuff
end result
we
of
eat.
a period.
Yeah, we have all this food stuff we eat that is byproducts of animals, and yet for some reason when it comes to human breast milk, we all stand back and go, ew, how nasty. It's like...
Okay, so I understand what you're saying there, but let's stick to this particular issue, because this one is actually much more fascinating than that, because this has, it has less, this was popular. People were buying it, right?
Yeah, well, they said they sold out.
Right, okay.
Hours?
But this
sold out immediately. Yeah.
But this comes down to a safety issue.
Right.
This had to be taken off the market because it was not properly vetted for safety. I don't care if they're selling ice cream at a breast milk.
The ice creamist said that they had it screened under the same standards that they use for donating to milk breast.
Okay, and I have an issue with the way that these breast milk banks are screening, because I don't think they're screening properly for hepatitis.
No, and you did make that clear in one of the other articles here too.
But I read through this, right? And so I wanted to know. I had some basic questions. I started with 2 questions, and I put them in the document. And they're gone now. No, they're not. No, they are. They're gone. My questions are gone. Did I erase them? Anyway,
I didn't.
I wanted to know, can hepatitis be found in breast milk, and can it be killed in pasteurization? And so I found that I found that hepatitis A can be found in breast milk, but for a mother breastfeeding, that it's not considered serious. It's really just kind of makes you feel ill for a little while. It's not a big deal. Hepatitis B, which can be found in breast milk, but hasn't been shown to be transferred to the baby through breast milk, but yet we have a vaccine for it. And so that's not a problem if you're breastfeeding. Hepatitis C isn't, but I found something that said that you shouldn't breastfeed if you had hepatitis C, but it might have been for other reasons.
If you have cracked nipples,
if you have cracked nipples or bleeding nipples, because all of these transmit a lot more effectively through the blood than they do through milk.
Right. And so D, hepatitis D is similar to A, but a little bit more serious. And hepatitis E is similar to B, and you actually have to already have a hepatitis B infection to get a hepatitis E infection, which I thought was interesting. So, but my question still remained, can it be can it be killed in pasteurization? I did finally find a study that said that even after pasteurization, hepatitis can still be passed through in the breast milk.
Right. They still found hepatitis markers even after the pasteurization process. So there is still some of it in there.
Right. So now going back to our original article, did they or did they not find hepatitis in the milk, or are they just saying that it's a possible virus that could be passed?
They said it's a possible virus that can be passed. They didn't actually say that they found it in the ice cream.
Okay.
Right.
But they said it was a concern.
Right, but one of the things that the study found is that they don't always screen for hepatitis at these milk banks. So,
correct.
So if that is the case, then if they use the same screening at the milk bank that they use to make their ice cream, there is a potential of passing along hepatitis A or C.
Well, they said they went with the line of blood donor requirements.
Right, that's what I was about to say. That's what they're saying, the blood donor.
Blood donor requirements?
That I would think probably be more likely to catch something.
Okay, perhaps that's the case.
Yeah, so they weren't being ignorant of possibilities. I mean, they were obviously taking reasonable steps
they
to
ensure
their safety.
Safe.
All right.
Well, I want to mention, kind of in passing, that many years ago I thought it would be a really funny Saturday Night Live skit if there was like a woman and she's got kids and she wants to do some sort of work from home business, and that the lady who comes to recruit her wants to make cheese out of breast milk. And I'd had this whole skit in my head.
Yeah, she did. That's true. That's true. She did.
So I thought that was pretty funny that they were making ice cream.
Life imitates art.
It does.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did. So perhaps their screening methods were good enough. This article
But
really doesn't say it.
There's a legitimate concern. I agree. Yeah. And if they deal with that, the idea of selling it, it'll be interesting to see how many people really have that big of an issue with it. Because I'd try it.
Sure,
I think
why
it'd
not?
be interesting to see what it actually tastes
Brian's
like.
had plenty of breast milk.
I've had breast milk. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No problem. Yeah.
But you haven't had breast milk ice cream yet.
That's
Now,
true.
That's true.
Here is the point that I want to make.
All right.
Based upon the other article you put in there about milk microbes,
Oh, yeah.
hepatitis is actually not that large a concern compared to
No.
what
No,
goes
it's
into the average cow's milk.
No. You know what? These people, and it's kind of a fad, you hear the, raw milk advocates. They are nuts. They are totally insane.
Yeah.
They have no idea what they are getting into. Raw milk is one of the most scary things on the planet.
Definitely. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be wrong, but the pasteurization process really just involves leaving the cows out in the field, right?
Fortunately, you are wrong.
Way
Okay,
wrong.
I'm wrong then.
Yeah.
I hereby task you with reading a book on Louis Pasteur. He was actually very interesting. Go good wine. Yay.
All right.
No, but some of the viruses here that are not killed, some of the viruses and microbes that are not killed by pasteurization is just makes me cringe. So,
Yeah, I kind of went down a very scary path with this article, didn't I?
you did.
Yeah. But yes, I got onto it and I just started, I kept going, and I was scared by the end. So, yeah. So I hope that even our commercial, cow's milk is being properly tested before it gets to us.
But they did assure us that mad cow disease has never been found in milk.
Right. And we can, some other time we should talk about, the issue with the hormones in milk and what that's doing to us because, that's bad too.
Well, you've made me swear off breastfeeding.
Oh, well, there you go. Good. At least it did
I'm
something.
sure your mother is actually quite pleased with that.
Oh, we can skip Pop-Off and bankruptcy if you want to talk about the countdown. We're starting to, I don't know how long we've actually been going.
We're going a bit longer.
We can move those to the next document.
Yeah, Pop-Off, who cares about Pop-Off? Crook. Let's talk about other crooks.
So I found this site, countdown to morningmayan.com, countdown to December 21st, 2012. If you guys want a good laugh, start watching some of her videos, and
No, she made me angry.
I found her just so ridiculous that I was laughing. But her name is Linda West, and she's apparently written a few books and does a what's it called? A lecture series where she talks about all her laws of frequency attunement.
Yeah.
Apparently everything that we deal with has to do with the frequencies being lined up and attuned and all this other stuff.
Yak.
She references The Secret. I saw that.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny, actually. If you already know about The Secret and this other thing, then obviously you're stupid enough to fall for my thing, too.
Yeah.
You know what, though? She mentioned a guy named Gary Braden. And Gary Braden. And so, Braden, sorry, yes, Gary Braden. Greg Braden. Not
it must
Gary.
be getting late.
Oh, man, you listened to this last week has been absolutely terrible. I'm exhausted. This guy is one of the main culprits of the 2012. Can I call it a delusion? Can I call it the 2012 delusion?
Go for it.
Yeah, thanks.
That
okay.
works.
I'm fine with that.
He's one of the main culprits. He's into a lot of pseudoscience, and she references him several times in his work. And I find it funny. I found an article that talked about this guy on, of all forums, King of Bullshit, David Icke, on David Icke's forum, that was trashing Greg Braden. I thought, now, I mean, here's pot, meat, kettle, right? And on this forum, somebody who talks about this forum goes through and just talks about all the pseudosciences that he goes through and how he's anti-science and everything. And I'm thinking, you're doing this on David Icke's, forum? So it's a strange place to find it. I found a couple of other things talking about him, and of course his website, which is just, you have to be in the right mood to spend a lot of time researching these guys because it's just dribble.
Oh, yeah. Well, just look at the site itself. Stuff like Linda West's Ultimate Power shows in a clear and simple way how frequencies are light waves that form us as humans. She teaches how to choose high frequencies to create our reality. I can't figure out how the hell anyone could take that seriously.
I don't know. She's not an ugly lady, so I don't mind watching the videos.
Yeah, at least he's worth physically watching. So you could just shut her yap.
Well,
for
no,
a
you
few
just
moments.
turn the sound down. Play something else.
So is the gist of her site telling us that, the world is going to end December 21st, 2012? Or is it just some sort of a realignment and, the dawning of the age of Aquarius?
I don't know. It's really
Well, she
the
says,
countdown.
is it the end?
Ooh, wait a
Is
minute,
it
wait a minute.
restart?
In the clouds above that Mayan temple, I see the face of the Mona Lisa.
Really? I
That's
see
funny.
clouds.
I see a big
I'm
nose.
exercising.
I see the big
my
nose. I
pareidolia
see the big
muscles.
nose.
Yep. See?
Yeah, I see the big nose up there above
You
that.
and I are on the same frequency.
Yes,
dear.
we're on the same frequency, 8.6 hertz, by the way.
Your frequencies.
Well, yeah, because we got our power balance bracelets tuned
Mhm.
so that it would adjust our frequency so that we would always be on the same frequency. So our power balance bracelets are slightly different. We have slightly different frequencies. Mine was 2.6 because I was further off. Hers is 1.8. She was closer to the proper frequency. I was the one that was off, and so my power balance bracelet is slightly stronger to compensate. So
Exactly.
now we're on the same frequency.
Okay. That's a step above synchronizing your wristwatches.
Absolutely it is. You know what, I'll tell you what, there is some problems with being on the same frequency. There's that time of the month. It's
Yeah.
terrible!
That time of the year.
Oh, yeah, well. All right, moving on. What else we got here? Oh, Huckabee.
Yeah, this one to me, I just wanted to point out, this is all about a man creating an issue so he's got a platform. And he's got a platform to say stuff off of.
Right.
But essentially what Huckabee did here was he criticized Natalie Portman as being a bad example for women as an unwed mother.
And we
Okay?
heard the same thing about 15 years ago over the show Murphy Brown.
Yeah, Murphy Brown's a bad example.
Was
Because I
it-
guess the
that was
character
Dan
there
Quayle,
decided to do
right?
The same
Yeah.
thing.
Wasn't that Dan Quayle? Yeah.
Dan Quayle, whose political career
Went nowhere.
has been just rocking since that day.
Well, he wrote a book.
Everybody.
Yeah,
is.
everybody's wrote a book. Limbaugh wrote two.
Here's what I find interesting.
Neither
though.
one of them were about being hooked on painkillers, but he
Yeah.
wrote two.
It's kind of recent within the last, 6,000 years since the Earth was created. Because prior to that, we lived more in agrarian types, or not agrarian type societies, but we lived more, in tribal hunter-gatherer societies. And it wasn't until we started, having crops and staying in one place that our culture started to change. Prior to this, the tribes would, multiple men and multiple women would be sleeping together. And that was really the norm. That was really what we were designed for. And this living in groups like we are now that stay in one place and grow very large and, mating one-on-one is actually fairly new to us since the Earth was created 6,000 years ago. So, though I'm reading a couple of books right now about this particular. I read Sex at Dawn that talks a lot about this, and I'm also reading another book called The Mating Mind. So I'm reading a couple of evolutionary biology books right now that are pretty interesting that are talking about this very issue and how we've changed and we have changed from the way that our actual primal nature was. And so I find it interesting that these guys always make the fallacy and make the conclusion that this is how we are supposed to be. One-on-one, married, having children. When
It's
that's not
saying we want you to follow our morals.
right.
Right.
Yeah. Where that's not originally how our morals were. And doing that is actually kind of going against how we evolved. No, and not to say that it's okay for us to change that if we want to for our society, but it's okay for other people to have other ways that they want to live and raise their kids.
Absolutely. And Natalie Portman can afford to do pretty much whatever she wants to raise her kids as long as she raises her kids to be good members of society.
Well, and she's a very well-educated woman as well. So she not only is she, a successful actress, she's also got a college degree. In fact, does she have I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I mean, she's
She was
educated.
doing, like, biology and
Yeah.
sciencey
And-
stuff and
Yeah. So,
And my understanding is that she's planning on pulling herself out of acting for a while to raise her kids.
Well, so he has the
So-
Academy Award, so yeah, he can justify that.
That's funny because what I took out of this was much more political in that he was talking about how most single women who are moms are very poor and uneducated and can't get a job, and so they wind up on government assistance, and yet conservative groups are always trying to limit poor people's access to family planning because they want to try and strengthen marriages and...
If we want to go political tonight, this one could take us into some interesting places. But...
Yeah.
Well, I could take the take on this that taking a poke at Natalie Portman was anti-Semitic.
There you go. Yep.
But now the basic idea you started with is one that I definitely think reflects great with a lot of what we talk about, is creating something to make a big deal over just to get your attention.
Mm-hmm.
We see that with the Woo a lot. You know,
And one of the quotes from him was, "Well, if you really want to understand what I meant, read my book."
You're right. Right. That's definitely a common thing with.
I was taken out of context about Natalie Portman, but if you want to understand what I meant, read my book.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, but then, linking back is that obviously from a genetic, biological imperative sort of standpoint, we have biological impetus to mate and have sex. People are going to be having sex, so if you don't want them having kids out of wedlock, there are safe sex practices to prevent pregnancy.
Educate them. Educate them and teach them not to be embarrassed by using condoms.
Yeah. I know I took this in a different direction than you guys were going with it, but I've been reading all these biological sex books.
No, the direction you
it
took
all
was
goes
beautiful.
hand in hand.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they kind of do. Yeah.
But I guess my question on this is, not only is he trying to sell books, but is this him announcing that he wants to be president?
Again.
Yeah, again.
You know what? Does he? I mean, maybe he does.
You couldn't pay me to be president.
You'd do it for free?
Nope, not even that.
Not even. You got to be a sociopath, I think.
I think there's only one man, maybe two men tough enough to be president. Clint or the governor. I say we change the laws, we let Arnie run.
No. Bad.
I just want to throw out there that, unfortunately, only one of our children was born out of wedlock.
Unfortunately for the other two, they
Well,
suffer.
but two of them were conceived out of wedlock.
That's
one
true.
was born out. One was conceived out of wedlock, born in wedlock, and then the last one, poor thing.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? We only got married for insurance purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, same with me and my wife.
I think I should put this out there because I remember on one of the episodes you mentioned that you don't know when our wedding anniversary is.
Uh-oh.
I don't remember when our wedding anniversary is.
Score! Get the lotion.
Actually, I know that I mentioned that I couldn't remember what year we got married. And that cost me dearly because I dropped the damn iron on my foot trying to find the wedding certificate.
Once more, just always ask me. I can tell you. Yours is an easy one to remember.
Okay, what's mine?
That I'd have to look up. I probably actually have it in my journal.
You know what?
Yeah.
Don't bother.
I just
Yeah.
have to
We know
figure
what
out
year
when.
it was because obviously I was pregnant with our second kid.
Right.
And I was
And
very
you,
pregnant.
You know approximately what month.
No, I'm not sure.
It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
It's not something that we've ever celebrated.
No. I said Mac's wedding got married when my son turned 1 year old.
Yeah.
So that makes
Yep.
it the easiest. I don't have to think about it to know when his.
I'm pretty sure, though, that your wedding anniversary, Bryan, Jen, is June-tember the 35th.
June-tember.
And I actually, due to our wedding anniversary in 2009, I don't think I'll ever forget the date because I didn't realize that our anniversary could ever fall on Friday the 13th. So I never thought about that.
Oh, and it did?
So my wife was were married on November 13th.
Ah.
And all because it fell on Friday the 13th 1 year when we had one of the worst years ever. We were joking about it. Our 10th anniversary fell on Friday the 13th, and that year had just been a horrible year for us. And so we kind of made a joke of that, saying, okay, that's why it happened. Our 10th anniversary being a Friday the 13th affected the whole year.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
And
so
now it sticks in my head.
okay. All right.
Let me bring up a couple more points
Oh,
on
sure,
the
heck.
Huckabees thing.
Why not?
just to throw this in here, I put in 2 articles about Huckabee and his pronouncement, mainly because the second one, the Vanity Fair article, I really liked some of the comments that came in there, and one of the things that was pretty solid all the way through the comments was that the unwed mothers reading this were really, really angry at his pronouncements.
Sure.
they were really insulted. And
Can you imagine?
I think if he was going for women's support, I think that backfired on him.
Well, they probably wouldn't vote Republican anyway, so there you go. So he didn't harm his credibility with his base.
So
I don't know if that's true or not. Making that up.
But, it's interesting, though, that he would choose to critique somebody who's kind of in the public eye right now so that he can get in the public eye himself. That's that's as dumb as, going after Angelina Jolie and all of her adopted children.
Well, it's horrible that she's trying to help, all those kids from Africa. Just terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Or that they're not all from Africa.
Given them a better life than
no,
they
they're not all from Africa. Once again, I'm pulling that out of my ass.
Yep.
How terrible of her want to adopt
Actually, I think
kids.
she's got to collect one from each country, hasn't she?
Is that what it is?
It's like Pokemon. I think it's like Pokemon.
Oh, is she going to fight him later?
I'm not going to speculate on that.
Okay, this is going in a very bad direction now. And it's my fault. All right. Hey, does anybody else have anything else to add here?
No.
All right. I see that somebody found a Hannah polling from Time Magazine. Has anybody read this, though?
I did. I read through it.
Oh, you did? Okay.
She's the one who got an award from the courts.
Right. She's the one whose father started Autism Rescue. Am I making the right connection there?
I have no idea.
Generation Rescue.
Generation Rescue, and I'm pretty sure that, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I think that it's her father that is responsible for that, because it's not Jenny McCarthy's site. She's just a member, I guess.
She's just
figurehead.
She's just a proponent. Now, I had thought that Jenny McCarthy was on
90210
90210 at one point, but apparently that's not the case.
Wasn't she MTV? Isn't that where she really made her success? Was there?
I think so.
Well,
Yeah.
I thought it was 90210 though.
I don't
No,
think so.
Playboy.
No.
But she was on. I do seem to remember her being on MTV for a while. I don't remember her being on any actual shows.
She had
Really?
a sketch comedy show.
Right, where her father was what's his name, Tan guy.
And she's written some books that were popular, and a few that failed terribly too. So, all right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm gonna play us out.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, as usual,
Pipe us down, lad. Pipe us down.
that's right. Hey, and also, you can leave us feedback. Come see us on Facebook. Call our number. Leave us a voicemail. We certainly love to have people. Well, we don't care.
Tell us what idiots we are.
You can tell us where idiots we are, or tell us you love us. Whatever you want to do. We don't care. We just like the feedback. It means that that people care, even if they care enough to tell us you guys are idiots. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you
Good
for
night.
listening to the Amateur Skeptics podcast. For more information about the Amateur Skeptics, go to amateurskeptics.com. To send us feedback, suggestions, or big flaming insults, feel free to contact us at WTF@amateurskeptics.com. Other contact information can be found on our website.
You can leave a voicemail for the Amateur Skeptics podcast at 720-295-7785. Music for this podcast was provided by OFM. To find out more about OFM, go to myspace.com/OFMHQ. This podcast is released under Creative Commons, No Derivatives 3.5 license. Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics podcast.